Hi, welcome back. Today I'm talking about the guy at Hogwarts who has the biggest heart, and that's Hagrid. Hagrid also has the biggest body of anyone at Hogwarts. In fact, Harry in book 1 describes him as being too big to be allowed, but I think that the biggest part of Hagrid is his heart. If you have read the Harry Potter books and you don't love Hagrid, that's okay, because his heart is big enough for you. And Hagrid wears his big heart on his sleeve. You always know how Hagrid is feeling. Even when he tries to hide it, he can't. What is in his heart and whatever his emotions are just spill over into whatever he's doing. We see him cry his giant tears. We see him depressed. We see him storm into Dumbledore's office to defend Harry, I think in book 2. And Dumbledore is like, yeah, I know Harry didn't do it. Then we see Hagrid a little embarrassed like, oh, duh, of course Dumbledore knows. Hagrid, kind of like Remus Lupin, is seen as a monster in the wizarding world because of what he is, because of the part about himself that he can't even change. But unlike Remus Lupin, who sees himself as a monster, I don't think Hagrid views himself this way, but I do see that he has a certain kinship and a huge compassion for monsters and monstrous creatures. He may only be half giant, but his heart is all giant. But I don't mean like in the way that giants in the wizarding world are kind of more animalistic. I just mean that his heart is humongous and he has lots of room for love in his life. Hagrid is also somebody who trusts very easily. Sometimes this gets him into trouble, but he also takes such great pride in the trust that Dumbledore has for him. He nearly worships Dumbledore. Dumbledore is one of the very few people who sees Hagrid's true worth. And Hagrid does not take Dumbledore's trust lightly. So what does Hagrid carry around in this huge heart of his? Love for creatures. The more monstrous the creature, the better. And compassion for the weak, the unloved, and the lost. We see this so much in his relationship with Harry. And it's kind of the whole reason that he gets kicked out of Hogwarts in the first place. We see this part of Hagrid from the very beginning, from the first time we meet him in book 1, in the way that he takes in Harry like a little lost creature, and he loves Harry until the very end. And the type of person that Hagrid is and how he views creatures is set up so well in book 1 and then referenced again later on when he gets Norbert. Hagrid, like so many other people who aren't even part of a fantasy world, dreams of having a dragon. And he is offered this dragon egg and he gets to raise his own dragon. This is a dream come true for him. But like so often in real life, the reality of this dream that he had is not what he thought it would be. It ends up being more than he can handle, and he ends up having to say goodbye to this little creature that he's come to love so deeply. And when he says, "Mummy will never forget you," oh, how can you not sympathize with Hagrid in that moment? That is so hard for him. In fact, later on in the series, when Hagrid talks about his time at Azkaban, he mentions that moment as being what comes to mind when the Dementors are near. The Dementors sucking joy out of your life and taking all the happiness from you, that being one of Hagrid's happiest things in his life, and it being taken away, oh, just break my heart already. And then we have the tragedy with Buckbeak. At this point in the series, we know how Hagrid feels about creatures, especially monstrous and magical creatures. Hagrid is so excited to teach care of magical creatures. What could be more perfect for Hagrid? He's nervous, he feels awkward, he's not sure if he's going to do a good job. And then the accident happens. And then all the anger that certain people feel toward Hogwarts and Dumbledore, and maybe even Hagrid, is taken out on Buckbeak. And Hagrid takes it so personally. He feels guilty, like it's all his fault. Maybe it is a little bit. Maybe that shouldn't have been his first lesson. That is a dangerous creature. But knowing that makes it even worse for him. He knows he did something wrong, and he knows his actions are causing Buckbeak to be punished. And he can't handle this. He feels like a failure. He tells the 3 friends that it's not worth it to come see him after hours. That he's not worth it. But he is still touched that they want to come see him and still support him. And Hagrid starts to feel a deep anger towards McNair, the magical creature executioner. What could be a more evil person in the eyes of someone who loves magical creatures so much? We don't often see Hagrid angry. We do later, especially in book 5. I'll get there. But someone who's going to hurt a magical creature is as good as Voldemort in Hagrid's book. And I really appreciate the talking to that Hagrid gave to Ron and Harry about friendship concerning Hermione in book 3. He's kind of seeing this from the outside, seeing how they're reacting to each other. Hagrid sees that Hermione is putting so much time and energy into school and doing what she can, and she's still making time to help him with Buckbeak, and he thinks it's kind of unfair how the boys are reacting to her. None of them are completely in the right, but he says, you know, your friend should be more important than cats and broomsticks. And Hagrid is right, and thank you for giving that advice. Those friends needed to hear that. It's not until book 4, I think. I read these really close together, so they kind of just all are one overarching story to me right now. But I think in book 4 is when we see a little bit of Hagrid's backstory and the tragedy that got him to where he is. Hagrid's giant mother dies when he's 3, and his human father dies before he even goes to Hogwarts. Hagrid is an orphan. Can you see why he would sympathize with Harry so much? Anna helps explain why Dumbledore helping him means so much to him. Hagrid also tells the friends that he's thankful that his dad didn't have to live to see him expelled. No one should have to be thankful for that. Oh! Hagrid, up to this point, has done his best to keep the giant half of him hidden. I don't know how you keep that hidden when he's too big to be allowed, but he doesn't go around telling people he's half giant. The wizarding world, as we know by now, is so racist, it's probably in his best interest to keep this hidden for now. And when people find out about it, he's harder on himself than the world is. He thinks no one will want to associate him or be his friend or be taught by him. He wants to quit Hogwarts. He basically wants to go into hiding. Dumbledore does his best to convince him otherwise. But you know, kind of when you're being hard on yourself and somebody you love like your parent tries to tell you, hey, that's not true, think better of yourself, and you're like, yeah, whatever, you already love me, of course you're going to tell me that. That's kind of how Hagrid is reacting to Dumbledore. And he's not convinced until Harry, Ron, and Hermione come in and reinforce what Dumbledore is trying to convince him of. Then we get to book 5, and everything we know about Hagrid up until this point comes to a head in what he has discovered and brought home to Hogwarts, and that is Grop, his own giant half-brother. Hagrid, who has such a heart of compassion for the poor and the outcast, could not have left his own brother to be bullied by the other giants. So Hagrid brings Grop home with him. He feeds him, he cares for him, he visits him in the Forbidden Forest, and he is beaten and abused by Grop. He insists that Grop doesn't mean to do that to him, he just doesn't know his own strength. Hagrid has this desire to teach Grop to behave, to teach him manners. He wants to prove to the wizarding world that giants aren't all bad, and maybe to prove that the giant half of himself is not bad, and the fact that he's half giant doesn't make him a monster. Also, Hagrid has been an orphan and without a family for a long time. I can imagine he's also trying to provide himself with a little bit of family. And then towards the end of book 5, we see a totally different side of Hagrid that we've never gotten to see before. Hagrid is capable of strong, righteous anger. Dolores Umbridge and her underlings try to take Hagrid in the night. They severely underestimated what Hagrid is capable of. And the students in the astronomy tower taking their test in the night are witness to this. They have never seen Hagrid lose his temper before. They're kind of in awe of how strong he actually is. And Hagrid, like Dumbledore earlier on, refuses to go quietly. I love that Hagrid was not alone in this fight. You know who comes to rescue him? Professor McGonagall. Amazing woman who will get her own video at some point because I just love her so much. And Hagrid, in the midst of this fight, does not forget what is so important to him, and he does not forget, before he runs away, to grab Fang, his faithful companion of so many years. He tosses him over his shoulder and runs off into the woods. And to some extent, Hagrid is right about Grop. He was able to teach him a little bit, because when Harry and Hermione go to take Umbridge into the forest, Grop comes looking for Hagrid, as he calls him. And through the next couple of books, we see that Hagrid and Grop have been able to form a pretty good relationship. Pretty sure they both needed each other pretty badly. Book 6. Couple of big moments for Hagrid here. He loses a couple of people, a creature and a person, that are so important to him. Book 6 is where Aragog dies. Aragog is the first monster that Hagrid had and cared for and formed a relationship with. And it's the creature that got him blamed for opening the Chamber of Secrets and got him expelled and got his wand broken. Aragog is very important to Hagrid, and now Aragog has died. It means so much to Hagrid that Professor Slughorn and Harry came to be with him during his sad time. And then, of course, at the end of book 6, we lose Dumbledore. Dumbledore's death affects many people, but Dumbledore held a special place in Hagrid's heart. Dumbledore was not a lonely or monstrous creature that Hagrid came to care for. It was more like Dumbledore cared for Hagrid as if Hagrid were the lonely and monstrous creature. And knowing how Hagrid feels about those types of creatures, the fact that Dumbledore cared for him that way means that the loss of Dumbledore affected him probably more deeply than anyone else. Even more than this death affected Harry, because Harry was taken in by the Weasley family. He has Ron's parents who treat him like he's just one of their children. Hagrid didn't have that. He only had Dumbledore, and now Dumbledore is gone. And I feel bad for Hagrid, not just because of the losses he's suffered, but because of his size. He is expected to carry the people who have died. He carries Dumbledore, and later on in book 7, he carries Harry when he thinks Harry has died. This is so hard for Hagrid. He's cared for Harry since he was a baby. He carried Harry from the home that Voldemort attacked to his new home, and now he's carrying Harry again. Probably the least monstrous creature he's ever cared for, but the one who needed him the most. And thinking he lost Harry breaks his heart. But unlike so many characters in this universe who have a tragic ending, Hagrid's ending starts to look up from here. Thinking he's lost Harry is his lowest point. But he hasn't actually lost Harry. Harry is alive. And in the final battle of Hogwarts, Hagrid gets to take out McNair, the guy he's hated for so long for killing magical creatures. A little bit of sweet revenge for Hagrid. And Hagrid is one of the characters that gets a little bit of a happily ever after. He gets to stay at Hogwarts, which has been his home for so long. I would like to hear in the comments what your most emotional Hagrid moment was, because there's a lot of them. You can follow me on Instagram and subscribe to this channel for more fantasy character studies. See you next time. Bye. I'm going to say that one more time and try to get to the end without any cutting. I didn't decide what to say at the end.